Detectives in a murder mystery investigation hear many things which are not true. When suspects have something to hide, they will obfuscate, lie, and mislead the detective. Killers have the best motive to lie of all characters. But even the completely innocent can mislead detectives as well. If the character doesn't understand what they heard, or doesn't comprehend what they saw, or if they make assumptions which are incorrect, the innocent can play as big a part in sending an investigation astray as the guilty. There are now 4 deaths to consider in MAGPIE Murders: Alan Conway, Sam Blakiston, Mary Blakiston, Sir Magnus Pye. You've heard many details about these 4 deaths. Some of those details are true. Some of those details are false. But why the details are true and why the details are false may be the answer you're looking for. Let's solve MAGPIE Murders, Season 1, Episode 4. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on the hunt to learn what happened to Alan Conway. What happened at the tragedy of the lake 12 years ago? Who decapitated Sir Magnus Pye? Spoilers for the first 4 episodes of MAGPIE Murders. If you haven't seen the first 4 episodes, send the kids outside to go play by the lake, watch the episodes, and then come back in. In this podcast, we'll run down all the suspects, and then we'll bring on our internet detective Catfish, our non-book reader, to see how his investigation is going. At the very end, and I mean the very end of this podcast, I'm going to give a couple of hints. I don't believe these hints will allow you to completely solve the mystery, but they will be fun things you can find that may help you in your journey to figure out what is going on. We also want to hear from you. Go down in the YouTube comments and leave your thoughts and your suspects, as we only have 2 more episodes left. You can also reach out to us on social media. We're at PHQ. That's the word double, the single letter P for podcast, HQ for headquarters, at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/PHQ. We need your help, detectives. Tell us who we should point a spotlight on. We say it every week, but if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, we need you to hit that like button, drag it, click it with your mouse like you're dragging it out of the lake. We need you to hit that like button. Every single person. This is tough. The YouTube algorithm's tough. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Tell us who you think the killer is. Subscribe if this is the type of podcast you like. Please, YouTube demands it. If you're listening on a podcast app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a review and subscribe. The algorithms know. In addition to this podcast, we put out a weekly podcast about the Star Wars TV show Andor on our Parsec Passion podcast feed. Also, on this podcast feed, we'll be covering the Netflix show 1899, the new multi-language show from the creators of the German hit Dark on Netflix. That'll be coming up in 2 weeks. Before we run down the suspects, let's see what episode 4 taught us about our victim, that super nice guy, author Alan Conway. Alan ran into Katie, his old work associates, before he became a successful writer when he was a teacher. He took her to coffee and then pried her for details about her and Susan's life so he could rip those details and twist them and put them into his new book, MAGPIE Murders. At Alan's funeral, Susan believes she's come to understand him. Alan didn't want to write detective stories. He thought they were beneath him. Just as Arthur Conan Doyle thought the Sherlock Holmes stories were beneath him. It should be noted that Doyle tried to kill off Sherlock Holmes, just as Alan may have tried to kill off Atticus Apprentice. Of course, Charles does point out that Alan did like those royalties. Alan, who we've seen in these flashbacks is not always the happiest guy in the world, blamed his ex-wife Melissa for the Atticus Apprentice novels. He didn't want to write murder mysteries, he wanted to write true literary, but nobody was interested in his literary novels. After Alan wrote these light, popcorn-like murder mysteries, it made him rich, but it made him miserable. As soon as Alan moved into his big house off those royalties, he would start disputes over anything with his next-door neighbor, Jack White. Alan also didn't show much sympathy to his son Freddy when Freddy felt he was being bullied for his father's sexual orientation. Now let's dive into these suspects, and there's so many in both stories. Let's look at the ones in real life. Susan Ryeland. Susan, we find out, actually met Alan and started his career as a writer because she met him through her sister Katie. Susan and her boyfriend Andreas are in a bad spot right now. They're not really even talking to each other, mainly because she can't decide between running a hotel in Crete with Andreas or running the new publishing company that will be formed under City World. Susan has read this MAGPIE Murders manuscript 3 times. She doesn't really know who did it. Her top suspect is the Vicar, which Charles claims is her go-to suspect. She also throws out Brent, the gardener, because Brent was at Pye Hall when Sam died, and also Lady Frances Pye. Susan claims not to have seen Alan's ex-wife Melissa or his son Freddy in years before she sees them at the funeral. Even though he's dead, Susan is still cold towards Alan, joking that Alan's now a national treasure as he's being buried, and joking to the vicar that Alan is now a permanent churchgoer. Now, despite all the jokes, Susan gets her world rocked 3 times in this episode. The first time is when she learns that her current flame, Andreas, used to go out with Alan's ex-wife Melissa, and in fact was dating Melissa when she dumped him to go out with Alan. The second time she's rocked is when Susan visits her father. Her father doesn't want to apologize for leaving the wife and the kids when he ran off with the nanny. No, he wants to apologize to Susan because she took him leaving so hard, and he believes that's why she never got married and never had kids. Now, Susan lies and claims that she never thought about her father, but she does blame him for what happened to her mother. Susan and Katie's mother, Samantha, drowned shortly after the father, Max Ryeland, left her. The police said it was an accident, but Susan has never believed that. Susan puts all the pieces together and realizes that her life has been chopped up and put into MAGPIE Murders. The character Miss Darnley is there just because Darnley is an anagram of Ryeland. And then the third and final time Susan is rocked. Late on the night of Alan's funeral, Susan gets an email. The email includes a picture of Alan and Andreas seemingly up high, as if someone took a picture of them up in the tower. We don't know Andreas' middle name, but I'm pretty sure it's Shady. Andreas is doing the hard sell on Susan to get her to move with him to Crete. He's also relatively silent when he's asked to explain how he and his cousin got the money to buy this hotel. We found out that Andreas was in a major relationship with Melissa, but she dumped him to go out with Alan. She knew Alan was going places. That was all it took. She didn't have any trouble dumping Andreas. What was Andreas doing with Alan in that picture at night? Are they up on the tower? Charles in this episode starts to become almost a Watson-like figure to Susan's Sherlock Holmes in this mystery. Or to be more pragmatic, Charles is becoming the equivalent of James to Susan's Atticus Apprentice. That said, Charles is also pressuring Susan for an answer on whether she'll be the CEO of the new publishing company when City World buys them. Charles says he spent his entire life building up the company, and if he can't sell it to City World, then the only person he could sell it to is a big publisher. They'll be swallowed up and his work will be forgotten. Susan implies that Charles plans to hire a ghostwriter to finish MAGPIE Murders, which that novel is part of the sale to City World. They need that completed novel. I should also note Charles pulls what I call a hero move by totally dissing Claire's attempt at conversation during the funeral. Ice cold, Charles, ice cold. Alan's son Freddy, who in the MAGPIE Murders manuscript is the basis for Sir Magnus's son Frederick. Freddy complains that he didn't want to come to his father's funeral. He's glad his dad is dead. He claims Alan ruined his life by coming out of the closet. Freddy got picked on at school by bullies, and Freddy claims that his dad didn't care that he was being picked on by bullies. Freddy does ask Susan who pushed his father off the roof. Why does Freddy think his father was pushed off the roof? Neighbor Jack White, who, remember, in the MAGPIE Murders manuscript is the basis for Jack Whiteley, the runner of the antique shop, which we've seen is willing to sell stolen goods. Alan always wanted to buy Jack out and get him away from Abbey Grange. But now that Alan's dead, Jack plans to buy Abbey Grange from James Taylor. If you look closely, Jack seems to pocket something as he leaves the reception at Alan's house. Is he, like Jack Whiteley, going to grab some trinket and sell it even though he stole it? Now, Jack claims he's never read any of Alan's Atticus Apprentice books. And even though Susan is a complete stranger, Jack has no trouble at the funeral mentioning, oh yeah, this guy who died, he wasn't an easy neighbor at all. James Taylor, who we should remember is the basis of James Fraser. James is full of himself now that he's got all the money, baby. All those pounds, dollar bills, y'all. In fact, James looks drunk at the reception of Alan's funeral. A bit like Jack, James has no problem saying at the funeral that Alan was difficult and they had bad times together. But he has the house, he has most of the money, and when he's ready to kick everybody out of the reception, he'll kick them out. Alan's sister Claire Jenkins, who remember is the basis of Sir Magnus Pye's sister Clarissa Pye in the MAGPIE Murders manuscript. In a previous episode, we saw Detective Locke going to Claire's house in Suffolk, and at the funeral, Claire and Detective Locke stand very close to each other. At that reception, Claire visibly bristles when James mentions that he's going to get the house and all of Alan's money. Solicitor Sajid Khan. Sajid is desperate to find out from Susan if he is a character in MAGPIE Murders, and he appears excited to learn that he's the doctor in the story, and he asks if he's the killer in the story. Susan's sister Katie. Katie introduced her fellow teacher Alan to Susan, which led to Alan's book deal and his great success with the Atticus Apprentice novels. Katie told Alan many details about her and Susan's childhood, about her father leaving with the nanny and her mother Samantha drowning, which did become fodder for MAGPIE Murders. But Katie claims she had no idea what Alan was up to. Max Ryeland, the basis of Sir Magnus Pye in MAGPIE Murders. Seemingly on his deathbed, Max wants to apologize to Susan, but not for leaving his wife and young daughters to run off with their nanny, and not even to say he's sorry that their mother Sam drowned. We have a new character this week, and that's Alan's ex-wife Melissa, who very interestingly is not the basis for Francis Pye in MAGPIE Murders. Melissa cracks at the reception that without Alan around, there'll be no more royalties. She didn't seem fazed that Alan came out as gay when he was married to her. Melissa does claim that the Atticus Apprentice novels were her idea, not Alan's. And remember, Melissa was in a major relationship with Andreas, but left him for Alan. Though she does say to Susan, "I wonder how Andreas is getting on." Oy. It's always important to remember the Vicar, Susan's top suspect, and Vicar Tom in real life is the basis for the Vicar in the MAGPIE Murders manuscript. One final suspect in the real-life story. Look at this man on the stairs at Alan's funeral. Wait a minute, that's author Anthony Horowitz, the person who wrote the novel MAGPIE Murders on which this television series is based. Alright guys, let's get in the Wayback Machine and go back to 1955, a fictional 1955 in a fictional village known as Saxby-on-Avon. Before we look at these fictional suspects, let's see what episode 4 taught us about the MAGPIE murder deaths. Mary Blakiston. This week we learned that Dr. Kamal called Mary a nosy Parker, and that she had her nose into everyone's affairs. That is very similar to the things the gravedigger said about Mary Blakiston in episode 3. Sam Blakiston. We should note his death mirrors Susan's mother, Samantha's death, in real life. 12 years before the events of the novel, in 1943, there was a tragedy in the lake on the grounds of Pye Hall. Sam Blakiston, who was a 12-year-old boy, he drowned. Sam Blakiston's father, Matthew, was in the RAF during World War II. Mary and the boys had been living on a farm, but Sir Magnus asked Mary to become his housekeeper, and she and the two boys moved into the lodge house on the Pye Hall grounds, right near the gate which we see so many cars drive through. The boys believed they had the entire grounds to play with by themselves, and when Sir Magnus was in the mood, he'd act like a father to them and lead them through games. Specifically, he'd hide some Roman coins which had been found on the Pye Hall grounds. He'd hide them somewhere, then leave clues for the boys to find them. One day, Sam and Robert were looking for the coins, but they got separated. Robert says Sam got the idea that the coins were in the lake. Later on, Brent found Sam and pulled his dead body from the water. Later on, we see Brent pulling Sam's dead body from the water. Apparently, when Matthew Blakiston came home from the war, he and Mary blamed each other for Sam's death, and they separated. Sir Magnus Pye. In episode 4, we mainly learned about his relationship with Robert and Sam, and it was re-emphasized that Sir Magnus did always look out for Robert, got him the job at the garage and the flat. Okay, let's look at the suspects in the MAGPIE Murders manuscript. Atticus Apprentice. Atticus is sleeping poorly with that tumor. He collapses in the morning bright sunlight, but he still won't tell his assistant James about the tumor, just like Alan wouldn't tell James about his stage 4 cancer in real life. Atticus does pitch a theory that the killer was looking for that sheet of paper, found it, and then burned it in the fireplace after they decapitated Sir Magnus. 1943 is World War II, and Atticus says he was in a labor camp because he was an enemy of the Nazis. James Fraser, based on James Taylor, Alan's ex-boyfriend in real life. James believes that the suspect they should look at most is Brent. Something doesn't smell right about Brent, according to James. James is also a bit squeamish about whether he and Atticus should attend Sir Magnus's funeral, and James is quick to note that nobody seems upset that Sir Magnus is dead. Joy Sunderling. We find out Joy is a secretary to Dr. Kamal, and Joy is the one who tells Poond that she and Robert didn't tell him everything about what they know, specifically about Sam's death. But Joy notes she says she doesn't want to tell Atticus about it. She believes Robert has to be the one to tell the tale. Now, even though Robert does tell Atticus about his brother Sam, he's very quick to say he didn't want to, but he's willing to do it for Joy. Robert also has an odd sense about Pye Hall. He says Pye Hall is wrong, the place is cursed. When pushed on the matter, Robert says he blames Sir Magnus, Brent, his mother, and himself for Sam's death. Sir Magnus Pye's sister Clarissa Pye, remember, based on Alan's sister Claire Jenkins. Clarissa bristles at the idea that she's happy that her brother died, even if that might mean the end of the Dingle Dell development. Brent called Dr. Kamal rather than calling the police about Mary Blakiston being dead at the bottom of the stairs. Brent tells Dr. Kamal he found Mary's body by looking in the window when he heard the phone ringing. According to Dr. Kamal, Brent must have had a key, and that's how he led Dr. Kamal into Pye Hall to examine Mary Blakiston's body. Brent was working there when Sam died. According to Robert, Brent didn't like the boys making so much noise, and their dog Bella was always scaring the sheep. The police questioned Brent about Sam's death, but he claims he didn't see nothing. Inspector Chubb, who remember is based on Detective Locke. Chubb feels overwhelmed working on all these cases, and he says he hasn't made any progress in Sir Magnus Pye's death. There are no new leads. He does point out that the scrap of paper in the fireplace has Sir Magnus's blood type on it. That fact makes Chubb believe that it was burned after Sir Magnus lost his head. In that theory, after striking Sir Magnus dead in the hallway, the killer went back into the study with the sheet of paper, then burned it. Sir Magnus Pye's son Frederick, remember based on Alan's son Freddy. Frederick is anxious for Sir Magnus Pye's funeral to begin, claims his dad was always late. Jack Whiteley, based on Alan's neighbor Jack White in real life. At the funeral, Jack needles Clarissa, claiming she has good luck because with her brother dead, there'll be no Dingle Dell, and he gives her a big wink. Dr. Kamal, which is based on Alan's solicitor Sajid Khan. If you pay close attention, you'll note that Dr. Kamal's office is actually Sajid's office in real life. Dr. Kamal doesn't take Poond to the hospital, but instead to his office. And he says he can tell that Atticus does have a tumor. He was the first person to investigate the body of Mary Blakiston after Brent called him. Dr. Kamal's theory is that Mary tripped and fell down the stairs by tripping on the vacuum cleaner cord. Did we miss any suspects? Did we miss any clues? Write down in the YouTube comments and let us know. Or reach out to us on social media. I love saying it. You can tweet at us, Instagram at us, @PHQ, or you can go to facebook.com/PHQ. That's the word double, single letter P for podcast, HQ for headquarters. All right. Let's get Detective Catfish in here to go over the case. Catfish, what are your thoughts after episode 4?
Hello, Governor. First of all, I am just delighted to see that Alan, even though dead, has not lost his fastball. I watched the beginning of this episode. He's so nice. I texted you right up. I was like, OMG. He is trying to sweet talk Susan's sister to get info about her so he can put it in his book. And then I was 4 minutes before the end of the episode, and I said one of my double C's.
Double C's?
Yeah, Catfish questions was going to be if he pumped Katie with all this information so he could put it into the book, why hasn't she recognized it when she read this story? And then I thought, is it only in the last chapter? But finally she figures it out with help across space and time by Atticus punned. Oh my God. But Bubba, here are my real questions. Who is more disgusted by the inept detective they have to deal with? Is it punned with Chubb or is it you with me? We'll find out by the end of this episode. And Bubba,
Yeah.
you promised me last week, for this is the third week in a row I've identified anagrams are going to be an issue. Now, okay, so we got a little answer here tonight, Darnley versus Ryeland, but that's not enough, Bubba. I am still trying to break down Magpie Murders, and I'm getting no help, even with the new character tonight, Dr. Kamal. I think you'll know that Magpie Murders does not have a K in it.
No.
Even the way I spell it. There's no way to spell Magpie Murders with the K from Kamal. So that's very upsetting to me.
Okay, well, we're going to get to my hints to our audience members who want a little hint later on in the episode. My hints will not really give away who did it, but they'll point you in places that may get you to a path where you might later see how certain things connect. Catfish, you love amusing magpie moments. So did you have any in episode 4?
Bubba, I had 2 amusing magpie moments, both of them just crushing, but deliciously bad. First of all, Fraser, our boy Alan's lover/inheritor of his estate, he gives a short, sweet speech complete with cocaine sniffles the whole time. Those are not crying sniffles. They're like, let me make sure I vacuumed all this up. And then he tells everybody, thanks for coming, GTFO. That was amazing. All right, gone. But number 2 was, and this is even more brutal, Susan's father. He says, I'm sorry. And she's like, yes, it's all right. I forgive you for leaving for mom and my sister and me. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not sorry for that. And then Annie and I were very happy together. But then I couldn't quite figure out what he was apologizing for. He essentially says to her, you were never able to find a man because you're untrustworthy because of what we did. And it sounded like, so then he was apologizing for that? I'm not sure. But in any case, he doesn't come up with, no, this is why I'm sorry. But it sounds like he's saying he was sorry for that thing. But if it's still crushing to say, I'm not sorry. I was very happy to not have to deal with you and your sister living the life with the nanny. That was darkly amusing.
Now, we are trying to point out that, Catfish, you are Atticus's apprentice. You're trying to be a detective and learning from him. Did you learn any detecting skills from Atticus after episode 4?
It's very tough, though. Atticus was having a tough time in this episode. A tough time on the ropes for Atticus. Seems like he may be going down. I did learn something very sharp from him tonight.
What'd you learn?
It's easy to commit murder.
All right. Thanks. I'd always been putting it off because I thought it was so difficult. Thank you, Atticus.
Man.
All right. Let's talk about these red herrings. You see these 2 mysteries. We've got the present day. We've got the Magpie murder manuscript. You love pointing out red herrings. Did you catch any red herrings this week?
So far, the red herrings I've said is the money that Sajid, the lawyer, gave Susan's insignificant other.
Andreas.
It's a Greek name. Andreas. Perfect. And then I said that it was Jemima. The whole Jemima shenanigans. This week, it's Sam and Samantha's death. I don't feel like this has anything to do with either storyline. It's just one last cruel shout out by Alan. You dick.
I have stage 4 cancer. I'm taking everybody with me.
Good Lord.
Now, I love pointing it out every week, but there is a chance that Alan had an accidental death, a suicide death. He wasn't murdered, but if he was murdered, you love giving your top 3 suspects. We have really gone pretty far and wide on all these top 3 suspects. Any new suspects you've narrowed down over the ones you've said in the past, or all brand new CYA type suspects?
Bubba, I realized there's only one more episode for me to guess who done it before they tell me who done it. So I have to decide next episode who done it. So that means, yes, this week I'm going to have all new suspects for all the crimes so I can finally finish this off. All right, but there's some actually good ones. Let me just say the previous ones I've nominated.
All right.
Alan's neighbor, his son, his sister, Susan's sister, Alan's suicide to F with everybody. Sajid, the lawyer who didn't like how he's portrayed. Susan's boss, Charles. Lee Joffrey, the writing waiter. And Jemima. Here are my top 3 suspects for the week, and I think this might cover everybody.
All right.
His ex-wife.
Melissa.
For not being portrayed in the book. Number 2, I was stunned. I don't know how I missed it already. Maybe I just didn't suspect him, but he's not been cleared, so let me finally officially name him Fraser, his lover, for the sweet, sweet cash.
Okay, now Fraser is the one in the book, right?
Oh, sorry. It's his compatriot,
it's
James.
Okay.
Sorry. So it's James. And then number 1, with a bullet, Andreas. For stealing his girlfriend. Holy cow, Melissa was Andreas's girlfriend. There are some real connections here. Susan finds out. Andreas is like, come to Greece with me. He's as almost as untrustworthy as her dad.
Yes, he is. I was saying Andreas, middle name Shady. Oh, my goodness gracious.
Well, you know, Bubba, the reason that makes me, he became a real good suspect this week until the final picture was a picture of him strangling Alan. And so then I thought, oh, no, it can't be. But so I'm going to hold out hope.
You also love clearing suspects. So far you've cleared Susan and Detective Locke of any foul play in Alan's death. Do you have any clear, conscious crossouts this week, Catfish?
I've painted myself into a little corner with these crossouts, but even though it really helps him a lot, I'm crossing off his neighbor this week. His neighbor is the one that Alan's lover, James, is going to sell the place to, and he's going back to the city and living in a sweet old penthouse.
Jack White is getting Abbey Grange, and James is going to London, and he is going to party down. Oh, my goodness. So, admittedly, I guess in Alan's story, the only thing we've really seen about Jack White, the neighbor, is they disliked each other, and Alan kept trying to kick him off the lawn. We haven't, as far as I can tell, seen any other possible reasons why Jack White would kill Alan. Okay, well, your number 1 this week is Andreas. So let's pause for a moment here and let's talk about it. Andreas, he lost a girlfriend to Alan, and Alan was gay. That was a while ago, let's be honest.
Yeah.
That was a while ago because obviously we see Alan's son. So we're talking at least 17 years ago, if not more.
Who when he cleans up, when he's not keying vehicles, looks like he's in his mid-20s.
Right, exactly. But then, maybe coincidence, maybe not, after Alan's death, but before the funeral, he goes and sees Alan's lawyer and gets a check. And now he's trying to leave the country. So there's apparently a photo of him up high somewhere with Alan when he keeps claiming, oh, I didn't know Alan much. I didn't see him much. So let's hear it. What is Detective Catfish's thoughts on what's happening with the boyfriend or unsignificant other, Andreas?
Well, this is a little tough, Bubba, because as you know, the check means nothing to me. Officially, it means nothing because I said it was a red herring. I said it a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, for the weeks all run together, that whoever murdered him had read this book. So Andreas is not one of the people that I would suspect would have read the book.
Oh, that's a good point.
Especially we're 2 episodes away from finding out who it is. If I had more guts, I would have said that photo was a red herring. So I had to put Andreas up there to cover my butt. But there's not enough detail to find out. I mean, it might be a good misdirect because everybody else, almost everybody we've seen in this show, has a very good justifiable reason to kill Alan. We don't know Andreas's, but everybody else, understandable.
Excellent point. Listeners, what do you think? What do you think about Shady Andreas? If you're on YouTube, go down in the comments and let us know. Social media at PHQ. Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/PHQ. Okay. Now, this story, Magpie Murders, as you pointed out last week, we got 3 deaths or dead people. You know, they could be totally normal deaths, once again, except the R.I.P. Sir Magnus. That's not too normal. But we have 3 deaths. We have Mary Blakiston's son, Sam, named after Susan's mother. We have Mary Blakiston herself, and we have, of course, lost his head, Sir Magnus. So take us through this, Catfish. Who are your suspects? What are you thinking? Why are you putting people on the suspect list this week?
All right. Well, I joked last week about putting Sam on the suspect list, but I can't do it. I mean, Sam try to determine his suspects. I can't do it. I'm just gonna pick Brent. Why not? As far as Mary Blakiston, my previous suspects were Magnus, the father of her children, which if I paid attention closely tonight, she didn't show up with the kids until she showed up with the kids already. So that kind of marks that off. And I had Lady Pye on for the same reason. I put the neighbor on twice. He's the shopkeeper. And then I put Joy Sunderland, Robert Blakiston, and then Mary killing herself. So once again, this week, I know you're going to say it's a little bit of a cop-out, and this is why I think you're going to be upset with me. I just wanted to make sure I got everybody. So our new person this week, we finally saw Sajid's counterpart, and it's Dr. Kamal. Now, I do have a good justification for this.
Let's hear it.
She's racist, so obviously she was a B to him. And then somehow I forgot to include Sister Pye in this.
So far, you've eliminated from any suspicion around Mary Blakiston's death. You've eliminated Detective Chubb, and then you eliminated somebody you had named as a suspect before, Sir Magnus. So do you eliminate any suspects this week?
I do, and it has to be someone I've named before because as I said, I think I've named everybody. But there's now somebody who I named this week. I am clearing Lady Pye. She's clear.
Oh, okay. All right. Francis, you're safe to go. You're not going to you don't have to stay in the country while under suspicion.
Just because just because she's snarky doesn't mean she's responsible.
Oh, I love that snark from Francis Pye. All right, now her husband, this is, of all these deaths we keep talking about, this is the one we're pretty sure it has to be murder. The guy had his head chopped off, theoretically, as he was showing somebody the door. Mm-hmm. Theoretically, somebody, after they chopped off his head, they burnt something. They went back into a different room and burnt something in his fireplace. Who are your suspects in Sir Magnus Pye's death?
All right. So previously it was Lady Pye because I also selected the NIMBY group because he wanted to do some building. I said Chubb did it for the grub. And then I said the neighbor. I said Brent. And then I said Darnley.
Mm.
All right. Now you're going to.
Got a little pie in the oven, Mr.
Oh, a little pie in the oven. Right. So this week, obviously, as I said, it's all going. I'm going to get everybody. So Dr. Kamal, I have to say it. Robert Blakiston, realized I didn't say it yet. And then, as you can see, I'm in a little bit of trouble here because I can't name everybody. That's right. Joy Sunderland has never been accused of Magnus Pye, but I have to instead give it to Clarissa Sister Pye. She did it for the Dell, Bubba. We saw a Save the Dell sign. She did it for the Dell.
Love that. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out which suspects you haven't dropped in this one. Well, you haven't dropped Frederick, Sir Magnus Pye's son. So, okay, he hasn't made the list yet. That's good. Did you clear anybody this week?
I did, Bubba. And this is not just a quadruple C, Catfisher's Clear Conscience cross-off. This is a quintuple C, a complete Catfish Clear Conscience cross-off. Lady Pye. So because I don't believe she has a modern time counterpart. If she did, I missed it. So Lady Pye completely cleared.
Very good, Francis Pye. Now, we do learn a lot about that death that happened back in 1943 about young Sam. Seems to be an accident. All we really know is that the boys were playing a game, admittedly a game set up by Sir Magnus Pye to find the coins out on the property. Somehow Sam ends up in the lake. Next thing we know, Brent is pulling his dead body out of the lake. Any suspicions in Sam's death?
Oh, yeah, I said already. It was a two-part action by Brent. First the drowning and then the pulling out.
Oh, man. All one, get a one-stop shop for.
Yeah, for the first thing he did was he drowned him, and then like he sucked up all his energy because Brent looks exactly the same as he did 13 years ago when Sam died. Exactly. Yeah.
So, Catfish, you have been the detective. You have been naming so many suspects.
Yep.
I'm just glad all of them are actual characters on the show. So let's see how well you've been doing, and let's just kind of go big picture. Got some quick hit questions for you. Susan states that in the Magpie murder manuscript, the infamous robbery at Pye Hall was a false robbery. Now, the robbery, remember, was somebody took some of those coins, some of that silver, that Roman silver, I think it's called, that had been found on the Pye Hall grounds. Susan says she's read the manuscript. It's called a false robbery. What does that mean about the robbery at Pye Hall?
Tell me if I'm incorrect, but wasn't some of that silver being suspiciously sold?
Yes, it was being sold at Jack Whiteley's antique shop in town. That's exactly right.
Right. So if it's a false robbery, does that mean it was being sold by someone in the household because they needed money? Magnus Pye?
Okay, I think that's a good guess.
They could say it was a false robbery because they were just trying to make it look like a robbery, that's what they wanted instead of a murder. But again, the stuff was in the house. They thought it was supposed to be there. It's at a shop. So
right. And it couldn't be a false robbery to make it look like a robbery murder because nobody was killed when the robbery happened. So good detective work, Catfish. I like that. Okay, so now these next two questions are just kind of philosophical detective type questions. And so what is the earliest event in the chronology of the Magpie Murders manuscript? What do you consider the earliest event that you need to be aware of as a detective of all the things that happen in that manuscript?
I mean, I called it a red herring tonight, but everything does seem to go back to Sam's drowning. So I would consider that sort of the inciting event.
I love that answer. Listeners, what do you think? What is the earliest event in the chronology of the Magpie Murders manuscript? Now, what's funny is that I tried to come up with how I would answer this, and I can't really answer it because I read the book. But in my own head, I thought, well, okay, you could have the Roman coins and silver being found on the Pye Hall grounds. And so I'm like, well, that must have happened, hundreds of years ago, somebody finding this Roman silver is what I assume. Then the second thing I thought was Clarissa was born a few minutes after Magnus, and so that meant Magnus got Pye Hall and she didn't, right? She didn't get to inherit because she wasn't the firstborn. And then I thought the third thing might be Magnus asks Mary to be his housekeeper, and you're right. We assume shortly after that is when the tragedy happened with old Sam. So those are my ideas. Listeners, what are your thoughts? What's the earliest event we need to pay attention to at Pye Hall in the Magpie murder manuscript? Or maybe it's pre-Pye Hall. Okay, and then finally, what's the earliest event in the real life chronology of Alan and Susan in making these books? What do you think is the earliest event that we really need to pay attention to solve this crime?
I was going to say in kind of a mirroring that it is Samantha's drowning, but I kind of seeing where you're going with this. I think because again, I'm not unlike where I think Sam's drowning kind of sets everything else into motion, I don't think Samantha's. I think it is at school when Alan and Andreas and Melissa
and Katie are all there as teachers. No, I think that's really good. Now, I'm trying to think how I answered that. Oh, so I answered it as Susan's dad leaving her mom as kind of being the earliest thing we need to think about. And the reason why this question's here is last week, Atticus pooned his vision when Susan's trying to figure things out, is he tells her, think about the things in the order that they occurred in. And so next week, when we come to my hints, I may go a bit further into this, thinking about, okay, if A happened, then B happened, then C happened, what kind of can you deduce from that? But before we get to that, who cares what I think? Detective Catfish needs to know what you think. You need to help him solve this case.
Please.
So let's get to some feedback. And our first bit is just a nice pat on the back from somebody on YouTube named Kathy. Kathy wrote, I love these videos. It helps with the confusion of this case. And this case can be confusing, Kathy. So thank you so much. What's the next bit, Catfish?
All right, Diana Scrimger says, Is Alan Conway really Susan's father?
Oh, no.
Whoa.
Oh, no.
I don't think he's old enough, is he?
No, but I love Diana is really thinking outside the box. This is great. She's got some more
Oh, she
kind of
says
wide thought.
she says both are sick. Is that true? So Susan's is Alan Conway real? No, both are sick.
Meaning Susan's father is sick, and Alan
Susan's
Conway
father's sick.
had cancer.
Okay, I understood. All right. The waiter in the restaurant had motive for murder.
Yes, Lee Jaffrey.
What was in the picture that Susan turned over? Maybe this is all Susan's dream. Maybe he was never murdered, but is actually alive. We will read the book after watching this show.
Now, I love that, Diana. She is going wide. She's coming up with big theories. Maybe this is Susan, trying to repress memories of what happened to her as a child. Shutter Island, is that the name of that DiCaprio film? Oh, I love this. We got this bit from Laura in an email, and you can email us at hello@doublepmedia.com. That's the word hello @doublepmedia.com if you want to send an email. Laura wrote, I listened to your podcast for Only Murders in the Building, so I thought I'd give Magpie Murders a try. I'm really enjoying it, so thank you. I have a question about waiter-writer Lee Jaffrey. How does Lee know about his story being plagiarized when the book hasn't even been released yet? Only a few people know about the manuscript. Lee said he sent an email to the publisher, but how would he even know to do that in the first place? Wonderful question.
Now, that is a great question. Bubba, forgive me if I'm wrong, and maybe this is still covering from Waiter Writer, but he did say he heard there were some publicly known details about the book. And that'd be a good way for him to know that it's been plagiarized, because really it only matches in sort of major details.
Right. What I responded in an email to Laura is in the first episode, there was that German bookseller at the German book fair that Susan went to who said, oh, yes, Magpie Murders is coming out. So there must have been some press release with at the very least the title about, hey, Alan Conway's releasing a book called Magpie Murders. So Lee would at least know, hey,
right. But
this
Lee,
guy's taking my
Lee
time.
knew more than just the titles. He knew
That's
some
exactly right.
details.
No, that's exactly right. And Laura, keep those emails coming. We love it. Our last bit of feedback this week is from a loyal listener, Luca, who has given us lots of great feedback. What did Luca say, Kev?
I have another theory for Sam's drowning. Magnus let Sam drown 12 years ago. I haven't seen the episode yet because my mother is out for Europe and we watched them together. But I believe Sam didn't know how to swim. So Magnus could have done it either as a punishment or by accident. Mary witnesses this but promises not to tell anyone if she's in love with Magnus. He says, I'm just making this part up. I understood. It's all a loveless. Then 12 years later, Mary and Robert have a quarrel. Joy pushes Magnus down the stairs.
Mary, he must mean. Yeah.
Mary, right. Robert believes Magnus is responsible. Robert beheads Magnus. Wow, there's a lot. I believe Joy didn't kill Magnus because, and complained to me for being a bit racist, Joy is black, and whoever grabbed the sword that killed Magnus had a white hand. I also believe the whole Dingle Dell business is a red herring. Thank you. I need more red herrings. He says, note, if Magnus was based off Max and Susan knew which characters Alan based on in the book, would that give both her or her sister a motive for Alan's murder?
Wonderful feedback.
Now, that is great.
On Luca's feedback.
Yes. First of all, I'd already been suspicious of Susan's sister, Katie, for the way she responded. So she could know more than she's saying, although she did seem genuinely upset this episode. So either she's a really good actress, and I mean the character, not the actress. The actress is very good. Or she is innocent, but not cleared yet by catfish.
That is exactly right. Luca, I love this feedback. And listeners, we thrive on your theories. Help Detective Catfish solve these mysteries.
Please.
You can write down in the comments on YouTube. We read everything. We respond to everything. We read it here on the podcast because we want to know your thoughts. You can send us those tweets and Instagram messages at double PHQ. The word double, the single letter P for podcast, HQ for headquarters. Or you can email us, as we saw today, hello@doublepmedia.com, or if you're on Facebook, facebook.com/doublephq. Ooh, so many ways. We want to know what you think. Now, we're going to end this podcast by me giving some hints. I've said it at the beginning. I've said it a couple of minutes ago. These hints will not tell you the answer of who did any of these crimes, if there were crimes. And admittedly,
Bubba, I'm going to judge how good these hints are.
Okay. So in a previous podcast, I'd given the hint that, boy, there may be a time you want to pause the frame so you can look and see certain things, and it may help you get a bit further along. And so now I'm going to tell you that the thing they want you to freeze the frame on and look at for a bit is something they've shown in many episodes. A lot of times it's not truly the focus, like the shot will start on this and then pan over to something else. But they have shown you the list of the titles of the 8 previous Atticus Apprentice novels in several episodes. And so if you look at that, there's something interesting there that Catfish may say, I knew it. And so there's some good things there. And so that's what I would freeze. Once again, it's not gonna like spell out who did it, but it is gonna give you further proof on certain theories you might have.
Okay, great. That's a good one. I'm going to give that one a B+.
My second hint is just a flat out thing that in these type of mysteries, you always have to assume something. Now, certainly the killer is going to look in your face and said, oh, I didn't do it. The killer's going to lie to you, the detective, to everybody for a long time. But sometimes you can be misled by somebody who's completely innocent. And in these first 4 episodes, probably more than one character, but one that really stands out to me as someone who's read this book. Somebody says something, and this person, the character who says this, is completely innocent. They haven't done any crime, but they say something that is flat out not true.
Ooh.
Now, they say it because they believe it to be true, but they are assuming. And if you can figure out that person who said something that wasn't true, but they believed it to be true and they were assuming, you could get closer to unraveling many of the mysteries in this show. So who said something that wasn't true because they assumed it, but they said it like it was a fact. So,
ooh, Bubba, I'm gonna. Can I make a guess on this one? And then you can cut it out if it's too good.
Sure.
Because you'll never cut it out. What if it is whoever said that Alan never shows his manuscripts to anybody before he sends it off to the publisher? Because that is what's stumping me. What if he shows it to a bunch of people? All right, that's all I'm going to say.
My third and final clue or hint, I should say, this week, the killer, or if there's more than one killers, their motive is not secret. Sometimes you'll read an Agatha Christie novel, and you'll see this line of, okay, everything in the dead person's will is left to Cousin Paul. And what you don't realize, and you have to kind of put clues together, is, wait a minute, the mailman is Cousin Paul. Oh, this isn't one of those stories. The person, or if there's more than one person who has committed a murder, their motive is right there in front of you. And so you don't have to be one of those things of like, why would person A do this? They've said it. And so those are my 3 hints this week. What do you think about that final hint, Catfish?
Bubba, I'm going to give this one a D because of what I said earlier. It's only regarding Alan. Because we've gotten a motive from everybody why they were justified to kill Alan. So as it relates to Alan, I'm going to give it a D. As it relates to the murders in the past, I'm going to give that a B.
All righty. Once again, we say it all the time. We want to hear from you. If you want to yell at me on Twitter, my name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at FitandTrim. That's FITTENTRIM at FitandTrim on Twitter.
And I'm Catfish. You can hit me up at CJGman67 on Twitter. And I need to reinforce, if you have not read the book, but you have a good idea, you have 1 week to send it to me and help me out. Only if you have not read the book. But if you haven't and you've got to get something good, give it to me. Otherwise, Bubba's going to make fun of me.
All right. We'll talk to you next week after episode 5. Let's solve MAGPIE Murders.
You're so damn cheerful about it.